let me start with what we're going to address in this presentation. I'll try to be as short as possible. We will discuss why a person needs a will, whether he's a local or international person or expat. And then we will address very shortly the legal system for Qataris and non-Qataris. And then we will talk about the joint account dilemma. And this issue, basically, we added in this presentation because we had many expats asking the questions regarding joint accounts and what happens. And then we are moving to certain considerations and issues that we need to address. And with that, we will show how we are trying to convert the process to a very rigorous, short, concise process for people to implement or to enforce their wills. Who needs a will? Any person who's living in Qatar, who owns any assets. And I'm saying person, meaning Qatari and non-Qatari, local and non-local, Muslim and non-Muslim. So it's applicable to everybody. But we will go through the differences between both. Why would you need a will? I'm assuming that the majority of expats or locals, if not 100%, owns cars. And they have personal effects and they have bank accounts. Those three issues are the main problematic issues that people face, or expats face particularly. In this part, I'll talk about the testamentary laws for Qataris. So what happens if I pass away? As a Qatari, I don't have a choice. Sharia and a Muslim, Sharia law will apply. And under Islamic principles, the division of the will is pre-decided based on how many kids you have, children, how many wives, and your relatives. One of the other issues is when 100% of us, and I think 100% of the Qataris have loans, at least car loans. So what happens if somebody passes away and he has outstanding debt? And the court will pay the debt before they distribute the will or distribute the estates of that deceased person. So whatever is left over will be distributed based on the Islamic principles. Now, moving to the non-Qataris, which is as well very simple, but it is complicated at the same time. Legally, if somebody passes away, the laws of Qatar, and they are not locals, and I'm talking about Arabs, Muslims and non-Muslims, as long as they are not locals, the laws of the State of Qatar in regard to wills will not apply to them. Now, one of the other issues that you'll face is guardianship. The other day we had a case where unfortunately parents passed away and they had 2 kids, and they were, I think, 1 year old and 6 months or something like that. And what happened is they don't have relatives and family in Qatar. So the government took the kids, put them in a care house, and they communicated with the embassy. The reason they communicated with the embassy is to be able to reach out to the relatives of the deceased parents. And the legal reason is that Qatari laws do not apply on guardianship. Now, again, with estates and inheritance, it's the same. But in this one, the difference is it will be the deceased person home country laws that will apply. Now, in this process, as much as it looks legally very simple, so locally we don't have an issue, it's clear, the law is clear, but expats will face issues. Issues around if somebody passes away, what happens is that everything gets frozen, you have to go through a court process, and in the court, they will need to see your laws to be able to decide, or they will ask you to go home and get a decision from your local court so they can enforce it. Now that process is the painful process. This is the complicated process, not the law. Now this diagram will show what happens when somebody passes away. Now there are two situations. If you pass away with a will and without a will. For Qataris, or for Muslims, we are allowed to basically decide on 1/3 of our wealth and assign it or give it or donate it to whomever we want. But we cannot assign or donate more than 1/3 of our wealth. For expats, the situation will vary between if they pass away with a will or without a will. First of all, I'll go through the process on what happens or what you need to do if you without a will, if you pass away without a will. And this process is, I think, the painful process that forces people to keep their assets at minimum in the country. You will be asked to, you're basically, family will be asked to go back home, get a court decision. Until you get that court decision, you will need to go and attest it at Qatar embassy in your home country, and then bring it back to Qatar. And then you will have to apply to the court based on which they will enforce that decision. One of the issues that happens is some expat tried to enforce their will, but not through a court decision issued by their home countries. What happens is that the local court will either ask you to go back home and get a court decision, or they will ask you to get your own laws. If somebody passes away, this is one of the major issues that expats face. I mean, most of the expats, when they come to the country, they have joint accounts. What happens is when you open a joint account, you will be asked to assign percentages, if it's owned equally or there is a different percentage between both husband and wife. So if the husband, for example, passed away and the assignment is 50%, let's say, when you open the joint account, what happens is the surviving spouse will have to notify the bank with either to close the account or keep the account. Now, if they decided to keep the account, they will be able to spend 50% of whatever in that account. They will not be able to spend more. If they decided to close the bank account, the bank will have to freeze the account until a court order is issued. Now, there are some considerations, and these issues are based on a presentation that we've done previously, and certain people had these questions. What happens if you had a will back home? Can you enforce it in Qatar? And how you can enforce it in Qatar? So I'm assuming expats would have wills back home. If you had a will, what we would advise people is get it attested back home, and then bring a copy to Qatar, so you can at least use it in the court system. The other issue is what happens if you have dual nationality. When you come to the country, you will enter with one nationality. You will get your residence under one nationality. That will be the recognized nationality for you, or otherwise the last nationality that you've basically possessed. So what happens in incapacity situations? People might pass away and people might be incapacitated. In this situation, again, your home country laws will apply, and this is part of the issue. If you live in Qatar and you go through such situation, it will be difficult to take your family through the whole process, legal process, to basically enforce your own laws. And we will come into shortly into how we try to develop a system that will facilitate the enforcement of the will. Can you have a joint will? Yes, you can have a joint will, and you can keep it separated. The way you do it, you either have your own will, each spouse will have his own will, but identical, or you will have one and execute the same one. So what we usually advise people is try and create a will in Qatar. Now, many companies advise their employees to keep their assets at minimum in the country, which I don't think they should. However, if they believe they need to make sure that whatever they own in Qatar is assigned or given to whomever they want, we would advise them to create a will in Qatar. Now, the way you do it in Qatar, it is not tested. So we are not claiming that this system is basically enforceable 100%, but it will help the court system in enforcing it. So the first obstacle is if you have a will in English, you will have to translate it. And sometimes, and I think lawyers face that, the translation, the legal translation into Arabic might not be as accurate as you would like. So what we try to come up with is a dual language will, because of the applicability of laws, conflict of laws. We thought that if we can have an attested copy of the legislation that organizes wills back home in your hometown country and attach it to the will, or at least the sections related to your will, and attach it, it will basically facilitate the process. Now then, after that, you have a trustee or executor. You can appoint a lawyer, or you can appoint anybody of your choosing. You don't have to appoint a lawyer to do that. Now, if you appointed a lawyer, it will, for sure, it will help in terms of the process. But the process is not very difficult. Once you have the will, the court is very accessible. You can easily go by yourself and file a court request to enforce your will. Now, the last thing is witnesses. It will give it more credibility if you have witnesses. I know that in the US and some jurisdictions, it's a requirement to have a valid will, to have basically witnesses. But in Qatar, we don't have a regime for wills, or if I may say, a set rules or requirements to have a valid will. So having witnesses is always something good to do. Now, what are the benefits of a will? It will basically allow you to manage your assets the way you want, especially if your home country laws allows you to devise your wealth the way you want. And then it will basically give you the opportunity to appoint a guardian or executor. In the will, you can do that to avoid having the government taking custody of your kids until a family member arrives and take custody. You can assign and indicate the guardian of your kids, as well as the executor. Again, you can appoint a trustee to handle your estate. Now, remember, the laws that will apply is your home country laws, and most of which allow creating trust and trustees. So you will be able to appoint a trustee that will manage your wealth on behalf of your kids, especially if they are minors. Having a will, this is what it will give you. You will have clarity, security, protection, and conformity. And when we talk about clarity, it's clear for you, it's done based on your home country laws. Security, it's not 100% secured, but it will assist your family in the process. Legal protection, again, you are applying your own laws. So if, in some instances, in our court system, people, non-locals, elect to submit to the local system to decide on certain issues, especially when it comes to family or divorce issues. The court will not apply Qatar law. They will ask you to bring copies of your own laws. And if you get these copies, you will be asked to translate them and explain them. So it's not easy. Conformity is something that will help, especially expats. If you have a will back home, you would want to make sure that your estates in Qatar are devised in conformity with your will, initial will back home. So with that, I will conclude my presentation.